let me ask a question. Who is the best player in the world? Recently, the 2022 Player of the Year Invitational Tournament, hosted by Infinite Mana, has just begun, and the requirement to be invited? Being the top 15 earners in the tournaments for 2022. And I can tell you right now, the lineup looks pretty stacked. You want consistency? You have the guy with the most top 10 finishes in weekend ranked in 2022, the legendary H Pain. Or maybe the guy that won 6 tournaments in 2022, Fake Muse. Or perhaps the man with the most weekend ranked titles of all time, Caution Fun. However, it's a tournament of 16, yet only the top 15 tournament earners are invited. So who's the 16th member? Well, that spot is reserved for one player in particular. It's the current, reigning, 2021, defending Player of the Year champion, Clutch. After taking a long hiatus in mid-2022, Clutch has been back for the past few months to make a statement. But how did Clutch become the defending champion? What was his story to even reach this point? Well, let's find out. Clutch's journey into Gods Unchained begins in early March 2021 as a small, unknown, free-to-play player. However, it wasn't long until he began making a name for himself. Later that month, in week 85, Clutch would make the top 10 in the weekend ranked tournament. As a completely free-to-play player, just take a look at this deck.
One thing to note about his deck is this deck is 100% core and welcome cards. Truly, this deck is mostly core cards, with a couple welcome cards like the Vanguard Axewoman and Echocaster. So this is an excellent free-to-play deck that managed 22 wins, an amazing 88% win rate out of 25 games.
Very impressive. In fact, weekend ranked wise, Clutch would go on to place in the top 10 7 times throughout 2021 and finish first place in 4 of those times, with one being a perfect 25-0 run. And to my knowledge, he is the only player to ever stream a perfect run. And unlike other streamers who play their weekend ranked on a delay, Clutch streamed his run live, which is something he still does to this day. Unfortunately, Twitch doesn't keep VODs for more than 2 months, so no surviving footage exists. Then in June, the 2021 Community Tour was announced by Copperpitch in this now private video, but we still have this poster. According to this poster, the Community Tour would take into account 5 different tournament placements. As you can see in the bottom, the placements in each tournament are scored with a certain number of points. The top 16 players with the most cumulative points would then advance to the Community Tour Final Tournament, a knockout tournament where the winner would be crowned Player of the Year. As you can see, the Community Tour Final focuses on tournaments and not weekend ranked. Unfortunately for Clutch, this means his weekend ranked performances in 2021 were fairly meaningless on the journey to become Player of the Year. So, how did Clutch do in the tournaments to qualify? Well, the first tournament of the 5 tournaments was Clash Immortals, hosted by Lion Unchained and Black Gaston. Its prize pool, $1,150. Format, best of 3. Rules, no Genesis, no Ether bots, no promo cards. Seems very easy for someone who plays top 10 in weekend ranked with a free-to-play deck. Well, not exactly. It was an early second round exit against Disreputable that was the result for Clutch. Doubtless would later be the overall winner of this tournament. Unfortunate, but not catastrophic results. But remember, there's 4 more tournaments after this one. Plenty of time to earn more points and catch up on the leaderboard. Second tournament, the Octo Cup, hosted by Team Octopus. Best of 5, single elimination, no restrictions, everything allowed. The result? Well, after a first round bye, Clutch would fall 1-3 to Soul 1 in the second round. Again, not a good result for this tournament. Aldous would take first place overall in this tournament. Now, while I don't have the leaderboards at this point, it is safe to say that Clutch would really need to start performing at this point. Remember, only 3 tournaments left. The third tournament, the Cujo Bowl, a tournament hosted by his own team at the time. Surely he could get the job done this time. Restrictions? Only 1 Demogorgon allowed per deck. Interestingly enough, a double elimination bracket with a best of 3 format implemented. Here, Clutch would steamroll Aldous in the second round, followed by a close 2-1 win over LC Hammer, but he would later fall to TBH in the 4th round. But it's still fine. Remember, he was still in it due to the double elimination bracket. Of course, until he ran into Gerald in the very next round of the losers bracket. So, although this tournament went much better than the previous ones, this was still a subpar showing. Clutch still needs a defining performance to acquire the necessary points to qualify. And there's only 2 tournaments left to do that. The 4th tournament, Madness of the Gods 5. Rules, Highlander format. You can only use 1 copy of each card in your deck. Otherwise, no restrictions. Best of 3. Single elimination bracket. So let's see the results. Okay, so for this tournament, I couldn't make sense of what's going on. For example, it says there's a bye in the finals, and that just doesn't make any sense. And as for Clutch, well, this is the only mention of him. However, if we look at the official top 10 placements on the Infinite Mana website, you can see that Clutch once again didn't place. So another no top 10 finish in this tournament either. Not gonna lie, the situation is looking pretty grim. It seems more clear that maybe the first tournament, the free-to-play tournament, was his best chance at winning. Either way, the 5th and final tournament is make or break. If he's going to perform, it has to be now. The 5th and final tournament, the TST tournament. A best of 3 format that requires wins with 2 different gods. As for restrictions and bans, no shield bearers, Lost in the Depths, Sirens of the Grave, Pyramid Wardens, Enduring Shields, Wildfires, Neferus, and Demogorgons. And the banned god powers would be Onslaught. Seriously, for those who don't know, that god power was quite the problem back in the day. Seeing that Caution made an entire song to mock it, it would only make sense that he would ban it from his tournament. After a first round bye, Clutch would beat Lan 2-1 in the second round. And in the third round, he would face his first real test, Vlozkill from Team Octopus. On a side note, I haven't been able to show any footage of any games so far because only later rounds of tournaments are broadcasted. And seeing that Clutch hasn't made it to those later rounds in previous tournaments, there is no footage to show. However, with the game with Vlozkill being the third round, we do have a recording and we can see how the game went. In a highly contested back and forth, Clutch will lose the first game with his Wild Nature deck, which did top out at double charging Oryx as win conditions. Seriously, that gets me every time. But unfortunately, Vla's sacrifice death would be just too much for that game. But in the second match, his nature deck would see success versus Vla's Zoo light deck. Score tied 1-1. The next match, Zoo Light versus Viking War. Despite taking heavy damage early on in the match, Vlozkill would be able to turn it around with only 6 health remaining. However, he would do something interesting. He would play Outcast Amazon and delve the Onslaught God Power. Very interesting. Anyway, Clutch would go on to lose the match and be kicked out of the tournament. And with this loss, he would have no hope of reaching the Community Tour final. And normally, this is where our story would end. But do you remember when I said Onslaught was banned? This includes picking the God Power Onslaught and getting a card to delve the God Power Onslaught. Take a look here.
The DQ, because I literally asked Caution, I was like, am I allowed to, because he knows, like, I was a big Onslaught guy. So I asked him, and he's like, no. it says it's banned. So I'm like, okay. I just wanted to make sure, because if it wasn't banned, I was gonna do the exact same thing Vlaws did. But I said, "Yo, Caution, is changing your GP to Onslaught mid-game banned too?" He said, "Yes. If you use Onslaught GP, doesn't matter when." I said, "Thank you." On the 13th. That's when it happened. 7 days later. That is comedy.
Yes, I know. Vloskill getting disqualified from a tournament for breaking the rules? Shocking stuff, right? Like we'll never see this happen again. Anyway, this allowed Clutch to move on to round 4 against Dragon. In Game 1, Clutch's nature would prove too strong for Dragon's Zoo Light. Funnily enough, in Game 2 the same thing would play out, but in reverse. The win goes to Dragon and the series is tied 1-1. Now just Game 3 left. A mirror Zoo Light matchup with Clutch going first. And as you would expect, Clutch took board early and held on. Another opponent down, and 3 more rounds to go. Round 5. The Professerf would be the next opponent. Now, the Professerf has had quite the tournament to this point, dispatching of Crumpy Lumpkins in round 3 and sweeping Owlduck in round 4. And in round 5 against Clutch, he would come out swinging with his Hidden Rush Deception deck against Clutch's nature. With some unlucky hits from confused creatures and missed clears, Game 1 would go to the Professor. And in Game 2, it would be a mirror matchup. Despite going second, Clutch would grind out the win. Series tied 1-1. Game 3, a Zoo Light mirror matchup. This time going first. And after establishing a solid board and playing Odysseus, Game 3 was over. And the Professor was out. The semifinals would be against Seer, followed by the finals against Fate. And don't get me wrong, I would love to go over them, and I'm sure they're great matches to look at. But Clutch decided not to record them. Nice. I tried hard to look for any footage of these games, but I couldn't come up with anything. Anyway, here are the final results. Clutch winning first place, Fate second, and Rachmanon third, followed by everyone else. So where does this place Clutch in the Community Tour leaderboard? Before the TST tournament, he was near the bottom with 35 points, which is far from qualifying. However, first place in the tournament is worth 120 points. So at the end of the tour, he is at a total of 155 points. Good enough for 5th place. In October, the Community Tour Final would finally take place. And here are the rules for the tournaments. Single elimination, no restrictions. Now, this would normally restrict a free-to-play player like Clutch, but that's not quite accurate. Do you remember earlier in the video when I said those top 10 finishes wouldn't really mean anything? Well, I lied. You see, those prizes have been funding the expansion of his collection for quite some time now. In fact, at this point in time, Clutch has almost every card in the game. Of course, with the exception of a few promo cards. But my point is that at this point in his story, he stands on an even playing field with the rest of the top 16. And here are the top 16 players in the tournament. For 2021, that's quite the stacked lineup. So, Who is going to be Clutch's opponent in the first round? Well, let's just say it's an old rival with a score to settle with him.